Welcome, everyone. We are back and better than ever. I'm doing my best Mike Greenberg impersonation right off the bat, Joe Matz. That makes you Mike Golick. I'm sorry. We are back after missing last week. I'm sorry. I was in Cherokee, North Carolina, and then went to the Falcons-Bucks game. And sometime in those 2 days, I got the plague, Joe, and I was dying. Anybody that knows me knows for me to miss one of my two articles and not do either of the DFS shows, and actually any of the DFS shows. I didn't do the one Sunday either. I'm in rough shape because I love this stuff and I love to hear myself talk. So it was a tough pill for me to swallow. But we're back, excited about this week. We're just talking about, and we will be doing the MME show on Fantasy and Frames tomorrow night. We're not going to talk about those plays today because it's cash game, but just this is an interesting week. Rattler is starting at 4,000. May's out there at 48. Like, there are some really cool lineups you can do, so you're going to have some fun with that. But we're cash. We want to win money, and that is what we're here to do today. Real quickly before we get into it, be sure to check out all the great stuff on fantasy6pack.net. The Fantasy Six Pack YouTube channel, all the different social media shows. I know Chris Robin just put out his Thursday night preview. Huge game tonight for the Seahawks versus the Niners. The Niners need to win, or they're going to be 2.5 games out of their division 6 weeks in. Who had that on their bingo card? I actually did a little 2-minute video excerpt in Chris's video talking about my favorite captain play for tonight. So go check that out on the YouTube channel, even though I just realized by the time this is up, that's already happened. So
yeah, it'll be a little too late, but
my
hopefully
bad.
People already know where to look.
Knowing it's Chris Robin, I'm sure you're checking out. That's at Detroit Beastie, some of the best stuff. I want to thank Dave Eddy for filling in on me for me on the Sunday Social Show last Sunday. That's like getting Barry Bonds to pinch hit for you. Really appreciate him doing that. But we're going to get into cash this week. Let's start with the quarterbacks. And Joe, I am one of the lessons this year, and I'm a big lessons guy. These running QBs are becoming really difficult for me not to play in DFS.
Sure.
Same deal for fantasy. Like, I'm almost to the point where by this time next year, in the lead up, I will be saying, I only want quarterbacks with rushing upside. They don't have to have, necessarily Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson upside, but I do want at least like Caleb Williams upside, right? Like, he's rushed for over 100 yards and a rushing touchdown through 5 games. He's had a game of 40 yards. Like, he's proven he can run the ball. Drake May, another guy who I'm very intrigued to see. I didn't realize how much he ran in college. Did you know? I actually looked it up for the article this week.
He ran a lot, actually.
16 rushing touchdowns the last 2 seasons. Yeah, I did not know that was the kind of QB we're getting. But for me this week, again, for cash, there's 2 obvious names. Obviously, Lamar Jackson. If you watched Lamar versus Cincinnati last week, I mean, have you ever seen a quarterback play at a more infuriating level if you're an opposing defense than what Lamar did last week? The touchdown to Likely where he fumbled the ball. What can you do?
Double stiff arms, and then throws back across the field into the end zone. And basically, anyone else does that, you're like, no, this is insane. Like, maybe Mahomes or Josh Allen, you're like, there's a chance this works. Those are the only other 2 guys you'd even consider that play working.
Right? It's insane.
It was absurd.
He's really starting to figure out zones, which, remember, that was kind of the one thing that really gave him issues, was you sort of make Lamar stay in the pocket, right? Don't let him roll out.
Keep eyes on
the big play. Yeah, take away. And he's learning. If you watch, there was a lot of dumps to Flowers, the backs, the tight ends. He's hitting all these different tight ends, and just a scary time. And I mean, for cash, again, you want 3 times their price. He scored 24 points or more in 4 or 5. His worst game this season, 17.4 points. And I think this game's going to become another one of these shootouts. And the reason I say that, and why I like the guy on the other side as well, Jaden Daniels, is Baltimore is a terrifying team if they get up. Because we've seen when they're able to really lean on Derrick Henry, they have murdered their opponents. Their two easiest wins, a lot of Derrick Henry. And those were against good teams, and they just ran it But what's happening is their pass defense is so weak that they're getting into these shootouts where they can't get into that kind of, we're going to be patient. We're just going to pound you in the mouth with the run, play action. And Jaden Daniels in Washington is a perfect team to kind of, take advantage of what they struggle against. I mean, by the way, we're talking about Lamar and what he's done. Jaden Daniels on the other side, he's now scored 20.7 points or more, 4 or 5. We talk about the rushing upside, averaging over 10 points per game just in rushing through 5 games. And those are free points at the QB position. But the way he's evolved from the passing standpoint, the first 2 weeks, remember I was saying, man, maybe I thought too highly of his passing abilities. He had 205 passing yards per game, 0 touchdowns. Since then, over 240 passing yards per game, the 4 touchdowns. The Ravens are allowing the most passing yards in the NFL right now, 3rd most yards per attempt, 2nd most passing plays of 20-plus yards. That's a problem when Washington is averaging the 2nd most yards per attempt in the passing game, and just in their last 11 plays of 20-plus yards. And I think that's what Washington's going to do, is come out and try to basically get up on Baltimore, get them into that shootout, because, again, Baltimore's lost 2 games that have been shootouts. They barely escaped the Cincinnati one. I like Daniels slightly more because he's cheaper. I do think Lamar is safer because he's Lamar. I mean, it's like, Jaden Daniels is a rookie. This is still a Baltimore team with some solid defenders, but it's hard for me. And there is a couple other guys I'll recommend and we'll get into. But for me, this is one of those weeks I probably want one of those top 2 guys in cash game lineups, unless I'm trying to be a little different and it's a little bit bigger single entry contest.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be hard-pressed to argue that those are the 2 safest plays with still huge upside. It's not like you're like, oh, well, I'll get 20 and that's it. It's like you could get 40 points the way. I mean, again, the Baltimore defense, not like you said, not playing up to what we are used to seeing from the Baltimore defense. Definitely not what we saw last season. I do agree, though, that if we're going safer play, go with the guy who's the 2-time MVP, who has a defense that we know there's the potential there, where this Washington defense, I think they're largely, so far as they haven't gotten destroyed in games, it's, because teams have become one-dimensional against them. And because the offense just keeps scoring, I don't think this Washington defense is any good still. So, yeah, I would say Lamar's the safer play. If you want to save the 500, you certainly can. I'm not as out on the non-running quarterbacks as you are. Last week on the Fantasy and Frame show, I had us put Joe Burrow in our official lineup.
That was a good call.
So, yeah, like it can still work out. And I've, had some success with Baker Mayfield this year. Although in one of those games he had a rushing touchdown, so sometimes you get lucky. So in that vein, I really like Jordan Love at 6,600. Now he is a guy who's capable of running, although right now still kind of come back from that injury. I'm not banking on getting much rushing upside from him. Although Brock Purdy did just run for like 30 yards against the Cardinals.
He scored at least 17 points in all of his starts too, which I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but again, 6,600, that's a very high floor, and that's kind of what you're looking for in cash.
And I mean, the one risk in this game is, what did the Cardinals do? Because we've seen this Cardinals offense look super dynamic. We've seen it just run dry. And that's why, to me, I'd rather just go with Love at $200 cheaper than Kyler, even with Kyler's rushing upside, because I know this Green Bay offense is going to do well. This Cardinals defense isn't great. If you go by DVOA, they're 29th against the pass, so they're even worse than they are in just the DK scoring.
Yep.
So, yeah, there's a lot to take advantage of. At the same time, Green Bay, Jair Alexander, if he plays this week, won't be 100%. If he doesn't, even better. So I think this is another game like, it's not as guaranteed, I would say, as that Ravens-Commanders game. But this game has great upside for this to just be a 31-27 final type of game, in which case both of these quarterbacks could have very good games. But the Green Bay offense is better. The Cardinals defense is worse. So
getting
if
Dobbs
I'm dropping
back, which is huge. Like I think that was part of the issue last week, is already missing Watson, Dobbs out for being an idiot, and that was just less weapons. So I think with him coming back, that's a huge boost to Green Bay.
And then the thing too is I expect Love to just generally get better as he gets healthier.
Yeah, that's a very
And
good
so
point. And he
each week,
didn't play
unless he aggravates
preseason
it,
either, did he? Right? Like I think didn't he miss most of the preseason and then got banged up in that first game?
I
So
don't
I mean,
recall,
he's
but
not. It's not like he's just kind of getting going. To your point, this season, he
right.
should continue to get better.
So yeah, I expect him to just get better. So yeah, if I'm dropping below that Lamar Daniels area, then I'm dropping down to Jordan Love.
All right, 2 names, and then we can move on. Unless you guys, I do like Kirk Cousins this week, 6,200. Sure. The concern is easy. Carolina is so bad against the run.
Right.
You would think the Falcons, they have done a horrible job getting the run game going this year. Something I never thought would be an issue with Tyler Algier and Bijan, but it has. Like Tyler Algier, to his credit, he's been good. Bijan has not. The issue is this is a Falcons team that is thriving throwing a lot. They're throwing on the season 61% of their offensive plays. During these last 2 weeks, that number has swelled to 75%. And all of a sudden, this offense looks unbelievable, right? 80-plus points the last 2 weeks. And last week, Tampa, a team that has really struggled against the run. You would think the same thing, right? They ran it 18 times and threw it 58 in a game. I was there. It was never out of hand. It was never like it was always close. So Atlanta could have ran more. They were just having so much success. I think that's kind of what we've seen the last couple. They're having so much success throwing with, London and Mooney and just all these guys that they're just throwing it more. And what I really like is this Panther secondary. Most passing touchdowns allowed in this season. They're bottom 10 in yards allowed per attempt, opposing QBR. Big one, passing plays of 20-plus and 40-plus yards. And Darnell Mooney has been just making plays of 20-plus yards left and right. He is being targeted at an absurd amount, 37 times the last 4 weeks. So I think you could get a really cheap stack if you want with Cousins, Mooney. Now, the one issue is if the Falcons D plays, maybe the Falcons offense doesn't keep their pedal to the metal. That's a fair concern. The other guy that I just want to mention again, Justin Fields, 5,800. Mm-hmm. Vegas, not very good. And we're starting to see it. Like his game last week was not good. He still scored 16 points, okay? And for cash, a guy at 5,800 who just the week before scored 36 points, just the week before that, scored 19.4. And all of a sudden, that rushing, we're starting to look at it. He's now got 2 games of 27 yards or more, and then 2 extra games with 55 or more. We're 5 games into the season. I know it looked kind of, dreary at the beginning because he only had 1 rushing touchdown. Now he's got 3. He still hasn't had that breakout rushing game, which we know is coming. And the fact that all their backs are out, with the exception of Najee Harris, I just think 5,800 versus a bad Vegas defense. And Pittsburgh's offense, I don't think is explosive enough where they're going to get up big and can kind of just run the ball. I think that he is worth a look. And it's actually, again, because of that rushing upside, and I'm so big on it. If I had to rank them, I'd rank those 2 rushing QBs, and then I would rank Fields right behind it at 5,800. And then I'm with you. You got like your Love, Cousins, etc.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like you said, the whole problem with Carolina is figuring out how you want to attack them.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether that's us filling out our lineups or actual offensive coordinators, there's just so much opportunity that, yeah, it's hard to guess. After that, yeah, I think you're right. It does feel like Fields has to have that game coming where he just busts out a 45-yard touchdown run.
Exactly. Yep.
And you'll feel great when it happens. The Raiders are kind of just blah on defense. They're not terrible, but, outside of the D line, there's not really anything that makes you worried. So, yeah, I think that's an interesting one. Like you said, too, with the backs out, hopefully that's more opportunity. And then after that, you probably don't want to do anything lower than that for cash games. Dalton, there's a chance. We've kind of seen every single version of this offense under Dalton where,
we don't get any pressure either, which is the issue. And why I kind of like your Dalton point is when he has time, he's a really good quarterback. And the Falcons, we cannot get pressure. We still can't.
I do want to make sure Deontay Johnson is playing if I'm going to go with Dalton. Just totally because then at that point you're banking on rookies and old man Thielen. And
in
a cash game. You know what? That's a good question.
He's on IR, so then it's literally like Mingo and Leggett.
Then it's just rookies. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that.
So, yeah, if there's no Deontay, there's no reason to do this in a cash game. And then like you said up top, if you want to really roll the dice, but probably not in your cash game, you do have the Rattler option.
4K
which
is
I think the upside, what I like about, at least conceptually, and what I think this offense will be with Rattler, I don't think you're going to lose any of the downfield stuff.
Yeah,
which is important. Now, I think
with Olave, Rashid, right? Like, there's almost, in my opinion, more chance for big plays. I think what you're getting into is more chance for turnovers, but there's also more chance for explosive plays.
Like, and we're not overly worried about the turn. Obviously, if you just like aren't scoring points because you turn the ball over too much, then it becomes an issue. But it's an opportunity for us with the defenses that face Rattler for as long as he's in there. But I don't know that I'm all the way fading. I'm probably fading. Actually, shoot, why am I blanking on his name?
May,
the running back.
Oh, Kamara. I'm sorry.
They're all pro running back. Yeah. Even though you'd think backup quarterback, that's better for the running back. I'm wondering if Rattler is kind of the reverse. There's going to be less opportunities in the red zone. That's going to hurt Kamara, who's really dominated everything in the red zone.
I do wonder, though, are we going to get one of those Kamara games like last week? Let's just move on to the running backs. Are we going to get one of those Kamara games where he ends up with like 11 targets and has 9
it's always possible.
Receptions with the rookie QB? Because I was literally about to say to you that I don't really like any of these guys until you get down to Gibbs, who I love Gibbs and Montgomery this week. We can start there. Detroit has proven in recent weeks they understand where their bread is buttered. And it's no disrespect to Jared Goff. It's no disrespect to Sam Laporta, St. Brown. Well, all those guys are great. But this team hums when they pound the rock. And they did it against a bad run defense in Arizona. And Dallas is arguably worse than Arizona, which is saying a lot. They have been just shredded. You look at what Derrick Henry did to this team. I think Detroit is just going to try to run it down their throat. I like Gibbs. I like Montgomery. You can play either one of them. I do like Gibbs's upside just because obviously he has so much more passing upside than Montgomery. And he also seems to make more explosive plays. But it's also hard to argue why not just save the 500 against a really bad run defense when Montgomery, he's seen like 18-plus carries against these bad run defenses. So I like both of those. Would you touch any, like you say whatever you want on the Detroit guys, but would you touch any of those guys at the top? Because Henry versus Washington, again, if they get the lead, that's great. Henry Washington's averaging, I think, 5 yards per carry. But what's happening is Baltimore, like last week, the Bengals are not a good run defense. They just couldn't run them because Cincinnati would score in 4 plays.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Because I liked Derrick Henry last week. And then, we didn't get, but it wasn't a bad game, but it wasn't
saved it with a 50-yard run. That was only
really. It was before overtime. You're right. It was a loss. And then even then 16.6 and 7,800, that's not what we're looking for. So it wasn't great. I do think there's a lot of opportunity there. It's a tough one where I would never talk someone out of it because I'd be like, hey, I think Derrick Henry can crush this Commanders defense. But yeah, does this end up being super back and forth? And could it be similar to last week where, the Washington
there's a very good chance it
isn't stopping them through the air. And so they just keep with that. Totally possible. With the Saquon play, I think we can feel fairly confident as topsy-turvy as this season has been, where like every 7-point dog is just winning the game outright.
Because both receivers are back, right? Brown and Smith, which is a big deal.
But for me, it's like Cleveland has no life on offense. And if this team has no life on offense,
that's fair.
The Eagles should be winning this game.
Yeah.
They should be winning it comfortably. We should see plenty of Saquon running the ball. Is it worth paying an extra $1,200 versus, like you said, Gibbs against a Dallas defense that, really it's just the last 2 weeks, they've actually been all right. They stopped the Giants, which, not something you're overly writing home about.
Last week that the Giants can run the ball with they want.
That's true. I don't really know what happened there, and then the Steelers, who have not been the most dynamic offense.
Run it, man. It's crazy.
The Saints, the Ravens absolutely gashed them on the season. They are looking like one of those defenses. deeper in we go, the more you want to try to find the defenses that
Yep.
funnel things one way or the other. They're so much worse against the pass. Teams are just dropping back, throwing it, or they're so much worse against the run that everyone's just trying to pound them up the middle. Cowboys 18th in DVOA against the pass, not great. This has not been a good Cowboys defense for the most part. 31st against the run in DVOA. Wow. So, yeah, obviously, like I said, the last 2 weeks, if you're buying in that this is a change in the Cowboys defense versus they play the Giants and Steelers, who have not been consistent in being able to run the ball.
You're right there. Yep.
Yeah, and especially we're talking about Detroit here. If they stop the run this week, all right, I have been converted. I believe the Cowboys defense.
I'm going to tell you right now, Joe, I give it less than 5% that Detroit doesn't have at least 150 yards. Like I really, because they got confused early this season. I think they got a little too much into, this passing offense is elite and we have all these weapons. And they forgot that, what made that offense so great? They would run it down your throat and then they would play action to all these great pass catching options.
Mm-hmm.
And they have so many good options, but without the play action and running the ball, it's Jared Goff throwing it a bunch. And no offense, like Goff is a good QB. He's not a great QB, right? Like that's fair to say. And I don't want it resting on him. A lot of good guys in this range. James Conner versus the Green Bay team, 6,800. Jacobs finally got that touchdown. We know Arizona's run defense is real bad. I mentioned Montgomery. Bijan scares me, not only because now he's on the injury report. I think that I believe this. And if the Falcons get up and it's a situation where they're running a lot, don't be surprised if it's Tyler Algier. Do not be surprised at all that if they get up and it's a situation where they're just trying to run the ball and kind of get this game over with, it's Algier getting a majority of the carries and not Bijan. So I don't think Bijan's worthwhile, even in just a wonderful matchup versus Carolina. What guy are you kind of looking at either in this range or just cheaper that you're like, these are the guys I want this week for cash at running back?
I mean, cheap. If Bijan didn't have the hamstring stuff going on, it would be Bijan for me. I would be all in. I'd be like, I don't care what's happened before. It's Carolina. This is an opportunity. And I'll probably still throw him in at least one of my lineups because I just think it is that good of an opportunity. But yeah, you're right with, you don't want to risk him aggravating a hamstring if you're up 2 scores in the second half when you have someone who's capable like Algier, a guy who's run for 1,000 yards before. So I do think, Algier is maybe a sneaky play.
And rushing for over 6 yards per carry this season. Like when given the opportunity, he's been excellent.
Right. Which is why both of us thought that was not the draft pick to make. But that's
exactly.
We'll
take that victory lap another time.
But yeah, I mean, just to hammer the Detroit thing one more time, I mean, so far this season, so again, DVOA, Cowboys terrible against the run. That's backed up in PFF grade. They are dead last in run defense grade this season. Meanwhile, over on the other side, Detroit, 4th highest run blocking grade. So, like I said, you can go with either guy. I feel good with either guy. Honestly, if the price wasn't so, if you weren't spending $13.5, I'd almost be down to put both of them in. But it's just, you know what? If you decide to roll the dice on the Rattler play, I actually don't hate putting both of those guys in and just being like, I believe this team is going to run it down their throats.
I don't actually hate that either, Joe. I really don't.
Like you said, there are a lot of interesting ones. Because, James Conner, who's just the guy you forget about in fantasy every year, and he drops 2 rounds too far in your season-long draft, and then he's just churning out 15-point games every single week because he's always scoring touchdowns. Jacobs, like you said. Even Chuba Hubbard, who has been really productive, especially since Dalton's come in. I mean, he has 30, 25, and 18 in the 3 weeks that Andy Dalton's been.
I think if Johnson's out, I like him even more, which I know seems weird, but I think you'd see him more involved in the passing game.
And he has 14 receptions in the game since Dalton took over. So we're already getting that.
Yep. That's where, and I like, too, that I think he'd be fairly low on. Falcons have been a good run defense. There's no doubt. Falcons have been a good run D, but I think that because of that number, and then again, if Johnson's out, I just think people will be off of him, and I kind of like that at his price. What about Najee? Because, again, Patterson and Warren both out, big workload. He's averaging nearly 20 touches per last 3. I know he hasn't scored a touchdown, and that's disappointing, but still averaged over 11 points in the last 3. So that's significant because a touchdown, any one of those, scoring 17, and he's kind of worth his price, right? And then what I really like, multiple red zone touches in each of the last 3. And then this is a Raiders team. They're allowing 5 yards per attempt. That's always good when you can get almost half of a first down on any rush carry. But the big thing is, despite playing Panthers, Broncos, Browns, all 3 rank in the bottom half of rushing yards this season, those teams averaged over 100 yards per game on the ground versus teams. So just basically anybody has been able to run on them so far. And the other thing I really like is they've allowed opposing backs over their last 24 receptions, 140 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, normally you don't think of Najee Harris as a pass-catching back because he's not. But without Warren, without Patterson, 13 targets, 10 catches, 105 yards the last 3 weeks. Again, both of those guys are going to be out again this week. I like Harris a lot this week at 5,800. And then I got a lot of lineups with either Spears or Pollard. I don't know if I can go to Pollard again because he really let me down 2 weeks ago. Ironically, he's had 2 really good games in between the week I was in on him versus Green Bay. But I do really like Spears at 5,100 because 40% of the snaps, Colts, second most rushing yards allowed in the league. He's had double figures in back-to-back game. He always catches the passes, at least 2 receptions. And the Colts over their last 3 games to running backs, 20 receptions, almost 200 yards to running backs out of the backfield catching passes. And Pollard catches passes too. That's why I don't hate Pollard. It's just I'm so nervous after getting burned by him 2 weeks ago when I was all in versus Green Bay. And Spears at 5,100, it's a lot easier pill to swallow if, say, he does not have a good game because it just saves money to where I could hopefully make it up elsewhere.
I mean, you make a good argument. At the same time, I really like Tony Pollard this week.
Okay.
And to me, it's just with Tennessee, are they going to be in the game or not? If they're going to be in the game, I generally like Tony Pollard because, they're not idiots. They've watched the games. They know we want to run the ball as much as possible.
We don't want Will Levis throwing it.
We don't want Will Levis having
or Mason
to decide
Rudolph
the game.
Or whoever their QB is.
Yeah, we want him in throwing the ball in positive game situations. We want to set him up with, a 2nd and 5. We want to play it safe. So, you look at Tony Pollard, the 3 games that they've been in, he scores 15 plus. The one time against Green Bay that they just get absolutely slapped in the face, he scores 5.9 and only has 6 carries. I don't think this Colts team, especially the way their defense is playing, I don't think that Tennessee's out of this game. So if they're going to be in the game, I like Tony Pollard. Like you said, I think Spears is a totally reasonable play too. Again, I think there's opportunities across the board against this Colts defense.
Especially
and if I'm wrong, if this
numbers. That's huge.
Yeah.
And DK, obviously the point per reception. And both those guys catch passes. They're both good pass catching backs.
Right. Yeah. Neither of those guys is, stone hands. So, I think either of them can be an interesting play, but Pollard's probably going to be the guy I'm putting in a decent number of my lineups just because I think they're going to have success running the ball against the Colts. And I think they're going to be in that game the whole way.
I like that. Again, I just want to mention before we move on, Tyler Algier, 5,100. At least 8 or 9 touches the last 2 weeks. And I know that doesn't seem much, but against Carolina, say Bijan, nicks the hamstring, say they get up big. He's been getting most of the red zone touches, which is really bad for Bijan fantasy owners. I think that's worth a look in cash. And sometimes, and it's fair, Dave Eddy, says you're good at this, Keith, but sometimes I think you get a little bit away from what cash game thought processes is. I'm somebody that believes in taking chances. I believe if you feel something and you feel strongly about it, especially when it's a salary thing for me, where him at 5,100 compared to, say, Pollard at 6,200, I don't feel like their outcomes are necessarily that far off. And it's saving so much money to where if I can spend up at receiver, tight end, quarterback, and get the guy I really like, get 2 or 3 of those guys, I'm not afraid to kind of make that rather than just trying to get the best baseline, lineup I possibly can. Was there any other running backs, or are you good to move to wide receivers?
If you are someone who's all in on fading the Saints right now, which reasonable, I would say I'm not. Then I think, there's like a Bucky Irving conversation at 5,400 there, because at this point, I don't see a reason to pay, first of all, the extra 300 for Rachaad White.
Right.
These guys are basically getting equal opportunity in this offense. We've seen them each be more productive at different times. So just take the cheaper one. But to me, I'm probably staying away because that Saints defense has been good against the run. And I actually think I don't see this as a game. Well, I could be completely wrong, but I don't see this as a game where Tampa Bay just rolls. We'll see. Obviously, like it's 50-50 on that, but I'm kind of siding with the 50 that thinks the Saints hang around, in which case
their defense is so bad right now. And I would love to say that Kirk Cousins and this Falcons offense is the second coming of the 2007 Pats, or even the 2016 Falcons. I don't believe that. Like, we're good, but it was so easy a majority of that game. Like, you can right now just throw on this team at will.
Well, and even more so, who's the only team that Denver's offense has looked capable against?
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Which, I mean, God, compared to what they look at like against literally everyone else, that's a starker contrast as you can have. So
a very fair point.
I don't think it plays out that way. But if you are someone who's bullish on Tampa Bay just rolls, then I think those Bucs running backs, and I'm always going to roll with the cheaper one right now in Irving. Then I think he becomes interesting. But yeah, I'd rather save even more money and go with a Spears or an Algier.
Love it. All right, wide receiver this week. First of all, just devastated about Nico Collins. Not only because
across the board,
he's been just such a delight to watch, but he's been such a moneymaker for me this year. Like all the big weekends I've had have been because of Nico Collins. And him being like a guy that I'm committed to. If I'm in on Nico, I'll put him in every freaking lineup and I don't even blink because I just think he's that good. Hopefully, it's just a precautionary IR where they're just like, look, we're going to shut him down. We want to get him 100% healthy in 4 weeks.
Right, because it's a hamstring, right?
So yep. And he's had issues with it, and that's the deal. Is that apparently he's had issues and it lingers. So let's start there, and then we'll come back to the rest of them.
Okay.
Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs. This is a New England team you can throw on. This is not the New England of old. I would, though, assume, right, that Gonzalez is going to be on Dell. And Gonzalez is a very good corner. On Diggs, I'm sorry. Does that make Dell the better play? Because, Diggs at 7,400 without, Collins, it seems like a discount. Like, I'm going to go ahead and say, because you're getting him 400 cheaper than A.J. Brown. I know he's averaging almost 9 points less. He's played a lot more games. But that's with basically the best wide receiver in football right now, the guy with the most receiving yards. And that guy's out, who's been averaging like 11, 12 targets. So you would think automatically Diggs, but it's just the combination of Gonzalez. And we saw Dell kind of feast before. I feel like 6,200 for Dell. I know it's tough in cash because, again, his best game right now, 5 for 62.
Right. It's not a lot.
It's not. But, again, when you have Diggs and Collins to contend with, and you're the third option, that makes a lot of sense. I think that if I'm rolling with one of those two guys, I'm going with Dell 9 times out of 10. I can't go in on Diggs for that much more, and with Gonzalez covering him probably the entire game.
No, I'm with you. Diggs, especially when I dig into the splits of man versus zone, because Diggs is pretty much the same guy across the board. Like he's good versus man, he's good for zone. There's a reason this guy's been an elite wide receiver. Nico Collins has been just awesome against both because he's just been,
but particularly versus the zone, right?
Yeah, he's been top 5 against whatever you want to put up this year. You weren't stopping him. He was awesome. That's why we're so disappointed. He's hurt right now. Dell has not been that. You would maybe think because of his size that he'd be more of a zone guy, but that's completely wrong. His target rate has gone up 4% this year when facing man versus facing zone. His fantasy points per route run goes from 0.17, which is a really rough number, to 0.28. And actually his yards per route run more than doubles. He's under 1 yard per route run this year against zone. So, and the Patriots run the 4th most man. And I went ahead and checked over at Reception Perception, where Matt Harmon charts, did this guy win his route against man? Did he win it versus zone? And last year, Tank Dell was in the 40th percentile against zone, 74th percentile against man. So this is not some fluky 5-week thing.
Right.
He is better against man. Patriots play a lot of man.
Yes, they do.
His opportunity goes way up, obviously, because a top 5 receiver is no longer in this lineup. And we've seen him put up 20 points. Yeah. He did that 4 or 5 times last season?
At least. It may have been more than that. And he missed games last year.
I guess there's the chance that the Patriots are just so inept on offense. And
I actually think
what happens with the QB change.
I think they're going to be sneaky good with May. I really do. I think that.
I hope so. I really think it depends on the line. Because I think the receivers, we're going to see if there's a little more juice there than maybe we thought now that May's in. I just don't know what's going to happen with that.
I agree. Holt, Douglas.
It's going to be tough against Houston, who gets a lot of pressure. So there's a chance this game just Houston's in a shell the second half on offense. But if the Patriots hang around at all, great chance that this is the Dell breakout game. Even if they don't, maybe Dell just breaks out first half. Like last week with Nico Collins, he gets hurt. You ended up not getting crushed having him in your lineups because he'd already scored a long touchdown. Yep. Maybe so. Even if this turns into a blowout, maybe it's turning into a blowout because Dell is already having a huge game. So yeah, I love the Tank Dell play.
So a lot of guys in that range too. And again, I mean, obviously Lamb versus Detroit, who's awful, versus just wide receivers in general in the past. That's intriguing. I think AJ Brown versus Cleveland is a great matchup because I think Philly's going to want to get the passing game going again, regardless of, to your point, if they're up or not. I think they need to get things right. And AJ Brown, I mean, he's averaging 26 points per game. I know he only played, what was it? It was just the first week, but
it was just the one game. But
that's the kind of guy he is. You know what I mean?
Well, and then just to add to that too,
of course,
the Browns run cover one at the highest rate in the league. Over 40% of their defense is cover one. AJ Brown going back to last year, because obviously we only have one game this year.
Right, yeah.
Second in yards per route run against cover one at over 4 yards per route run. The only guy higher is Tyreek Hill. So yeah, you put one deep safety against these guys, you have issues.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know it's like first week back, 7,800 is a high price point.
But coming off a bye 4 weeks,
good chance he justified. Right, they did exactly what it now looks like Houston's doing with Nico. We just played safe.
Yep.
We have longer term things that we're aiming for outside of just winning games next month. So yeah, I think that's interesting. Shoot, I know CeeDee Lamb has not been what you were hoping for this year if you drafted him in season long.
It's a great matchup, though. I mean, Detroit's just getting killed by number one wide receivers. I mean, they don't have a corner that can cover him, period.
Another man zone split, too, where Detroit runs a lot of man. This year, CeeDee Lamb this year, 4.33 yards per route run against man. 1.12 against zone. He's 3 yards better this year.
Wow.
His target share goes up 12% against man. And yeah, Lions, 5th highest man rate in the NFL. Wow. So yeah, to me, he is as high as that price point is. I'm fitting him into some of my lineups because and again, if you think Detroit is going to have a lot of success running the ball and scoring points against this defense, the counter to that will be CeeDee Lamb. So yeah, I love that combo. If you do like him with either running back from Detroit,
I got a lot though right now. My cash game lineups are these 6,000 guys. I love Godwin at New Orleans. Evans,
Godwin,
Lattimore. We know about that rivalry.
Yeah,
we know about, but Godwin, on the other hand, has feasted versus New Orleans. New Orleans has really struggled with receivers in the slot. We've seen Godwin's numbers. He's still, to me, underpriced, like 6,900 for a guy averaging 18 points per game. Feels like a steal. And then Olave is interesting. I think that's more of an MME play because, again, Rattler, you're tying a lot with it. I like it. If you're playing Rattler, you got to go. If you're going to go all in, right? But it's these guys. Obviously, I mentioned Dell, but the Flowers, McLaurin, I'm going to have that in a lot of lines. I talked about it with the QBs. I want both sides of this matchup. We can start with Flowers. He had a second 20-plus point performance last week. That's his third game of the season. 60% of the games this year, he's had 10-plus targets. That's significant. He is now with the Ravens using all these tight ends, he is the pass catcher in that offense. Like they have made him the alpha. We're going to feed him the ball pass catcher. I told you, I think that this is going to turn into another shootout. And then number one wide receivers, I'm going to keep saying this to the end of time or till Washington gets better. This season, 30 receptions, 411 yards, and 6 touchdowns through 5 games versus this team. And that was with one of those games, the team doing absolutely nothing. That's the Cleveland Browns and Amari Cooper. Basically, all that is from the other 4 games where they're averaging almost 100 yards per, and all 6 of those touchdowns have came. So I love that. And then McLaurin on the other side, again, another guy that, I was so high. I beat the drum all summer about McLaurin's my guy. He's the guy. He's the guy. You can get him for cheap. And then after 2 weeks, I was being a little bitch and selling and, being like, oh, this isn't, what I thought it was. Well, after, again, 8 catches for 39 yards on 12 targets first 2 weeks, a measly 11.9 points since then. 24 targets, the bigger thing, 15 receptions, 264 yards, 2 scores. What I love, 19.5 points per game. His floor in that span, 17.5 points, which that's huge. When a guy is just automatically getting you 16 to 17 points, especially in this price range. And then the Ravens, another team really having issues. Number one receivers, obviously Jamar Chase last week, 10 catches, 193 yards, 2 touchdowns. But we forget earlier this year, Rashee Rice, 10 catches, 100 yards. Devontae Adams, 9 catches, 100 yards and a touchdown. And then I just think that this game's going to be a shootout. I keep going back to that, but you look the Ravens' losses, shootouts to the Chiefs and Raiders. They barely survived the Bengals game. And the other games, they ran down their throat. Now, there is concern, obviously, in cash that maybe this is a game the Ravens can get up and they just pound Henry. And there is a possibility of that, but I believe in this Washington offense. Like, I think it is that good, especially when facing an inferior secondary, which is what we've seen from Baltimore right now. I mean, it's just insane. And I think they're going to continue to move the ball. And then the other guy I want to mention, because he's basically, these are the 3 receivers I'm using in most lineups. They're McLaurin, Flowers, Darnell Mooney, the best value right now in DFS at wide receiver, 5,300. He has caught 23 passes over his last 4 games, 37 targets. He's $5,300. He's averaging 19 points per game on DK for that. Scored basically 15 points or more in 3 of 4. This Panthers secondary allowed the most receiving touchdowns in NFL. Again, 6th most passing plays at 20-plus yards, 2nd most at 40-plus. Mooney is running routes. He's 100%. He is not. The Falcons have not run a pass play yet that Darnell Mooney has not run a route on. And he's seen the 5th most deep targets among all wide receivers. He is the guy that they are pushing the ball down the field. It's not Drake London, it's him. And he has at least 1 reception of 24 yards or more in 4 straight. And this is a Panthers D that has allowed 12 different pass catchers this year to catch a pass of 20-plus yards. I would be shocked if Mooney doesn't have at least 1 big play. If it's a touchdown at 5,300, it's already a value. But forget that. He's almost averaging 10 targets a game for a month. And he's 5,300 against one of the worst pass defenses in the league. And again, you could say, well, this is a horrible run defense. You could say the same thing last week versus the Bucs in a competitive game. The Falcons threw it 58 times and they ran it 18. So, I just believe this is who they are. They're going to be a team that throws and then occasionally runs. I mean, obviously you can make a case for Drake London, but Darnell Mooney is getting every bit of the volume, the receiving yards, everything. And he's 1,400 cheaper? To me, 5,300, that is an automatic start in cash for me this week. Obviously make sure, because he does have a questionable tag. They say it's just, the typical dance that teams do this week. But I think Mooney at 5,300, him and Kraft, who we'll get into in tight ends in a minute, are the 2 best values right now in DFS this week for week 6.
Unsurprisingly, I agree with a lot of the guys you've just gone over. Just to add to the Godwin play again, but the history on the opposite side is not good for Mike Evans,
right? Yep.
Which just gives us more reason to go with Godwin this week. The Saints are giving up 6.5 yards after the catch.
That's
worse than the NFL. Again, that would explain why they're so bad with slot receivers. Yep. Godwin averaging 7 yards after the catch. That's the 5th highest in the NFL. So
it's a lot.
Fire that one up. Even with Dobbs back, I still like Jayden Reed a lot at 7,000. Jaden Reed against zone this season has been literally the most efficient wide receiver in the NFL. Leads the league in fantasy points per route run against zone at 0.75. Again, some guys don't average that yards per route
Right,
run.
yeah, no, for sure.
And his yards per route run against zone, 4.57.
Wow.
Now, the Cardinals aren't one of the top, like 5, but they're 13. So they're running more zone than average, which just means continue to fire up Jaden Reed until otherwise. Zay Flowers, like you said, I love the Flowers McLaurin one. That Washington secondary has been bad. They've especially been bad at tackling guys downfield. Yep. 9 missed tackles on wide receivers is the 7th most in the NFL. They've given up a league-leading 10 scores to wide receivers and the most points to wide receivers overall over the last 4 weeks. So again,
that could be a Bateman stat as well, too, by the way. He's starting to be a lot more, and he's very cheap this week.
And then Flowers also another one of those guys. More, dating back to last year, we talked about this a lot last season. Better against zone. Team lead, 23% target share against zone. Basically, across the board, he goes up. And Washington 12th in running zone. So, yeah, love the Flowers play. And, yeah, that Baltimore secondary, we got so used to last year just being like, just avoid everything that happens with them. But 3rd most points to outside receivers this season. So, yeah, I think that Terry McLaurin play makes a lot of sense. I do have another guy we'll get to a little bit later on in that game. Going down a little bit, I still like the Rashid Shaheed play. I'm willing, even in a cash game, I think I might roll the dice on this. Shaheed against zone this season, 27% target share, 0.66 points per route run against zone. Obviously, we don't know the chemistry here, where obviously he was firing on all cylinders with Carr. Yep. So there's danger there. But the Bucs run zone at the 2nd highest rate in the NFL. So he's the best receiver they've had against zone this year, facing a team that runs a shit ton of zone. Quarterback who, at least we know, arm strength is there, willing to fling it based on what we saw in college. So
and in the preseason, to be fair, like he was pretty good in the preseason too.
And yeah, if I had to spend $6,500 on Shaheed, then no, I'm not playing him. 56. All right, let's throw him in some lineups. Let's see what happens. Even with Dobbs coming back, I still like Wicks more. He has the highest target share against zone, which again, Cardinals above average zone rate, and 20 targets the last 2 weeks. I know last week, it was a rough freaking week if you put Wicks in one of your lineups, and he's had way too many drops this season.
He's screwed me.
But I would, if I'm choosing between those two as the cheaper Green Bay wide receiver, I would still rather have.
What about Reed at $7K and Wicks at $5, bringing everything into account, including the $2,000 difference in price for cash?
It's close. I would probably lean Reed just because I have 0 reasons to doubt him, even at the price point where.
Plus, he can run some. If Dobbs, other ways to get the ball, etc. Yeah.
If Dobbs isn't back, and and then Wicks is at 5,200, I'd rather do Wicks. But with Dobbs coming back, I'll take the guy who I think is pretty clearly at least. Again, that's the thing. Is like you say, Reed's the clear number 1, but it's like Wicks is actually getting more targets the last 2 weeks. So that's why I will continue to put Wicks into some of my lineups. But yeah, I feel. Even with the price point difference, I would lean Reed this week. One other guy I want to get just a little bit lower in the 4,900 range, Ladd McConkey.
Ladd.
And I know this feels like a weird one because you're up against Denver.
It doesn't.
Surtain's over there, 2nd overall against wide receivers. For one, I don't think you're going to see Surtain and McConkey, because Surtain's usually going to be on the outside. I think the other receivers are absolutely non-plays in any fantasy sense. I'm not putting those guys in. The big thing for me is McConkey against man defense. Fantasy points per route run this year, 4.3. His PFF grade is 91.9. So he is grading out as just elite against man. Broncos, second in man coverage rate. And then Broncos within that man defense, second highest cover one rate. McConkey against cover one. Again, he's a rookie. It's not a huge sample size. 4.9 yards per route run. So man in general, he's awesome. And he's even better against cover one. Over a third of the snaps Denver is running is cover one this season. So yeah, I think this is maybe this is more of a larger field play than it is because
I completely
haven't
disagree.
seen the Chargers.
I think you're right. Target rate is 11th, Joe. Target rate 11th right now. His target share is 12th among wide receivers. I think you were on to. He was one of the guys I was going to mention this fourth. One of the best values because he's getting volume.
Right.
To your point, he's not going to be on Surtain, and I think that I'd like for the Chargers to be able to run. I'd love to be able to have talked about Dobbins. Denver's run defense, shockingly, has been much better than I thought they would after the year they had last year.
They've been pretty good defensively.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how this team is a winning record with what that offense has been outside of the Tampa Bay game. So the defense is good. And yeah, I don't think a lot of people are going to be on this.
I completely agree.
Yeah, with what we've seen from McConkey against teams that are running similar stuff on defense, there's good reason to believe that he's going to easily justify that $4,900 price.
And if they get down, I keep telling people, if they can get really down in a game with his target rate and they just have not thrown the ball, he's going to have a monster game because he is getting such a huge piece of that Chargers passing pie, obviously. So the other guy I want to mention, if we're moving tight ends, Demario Douglas, 4,400. He has proved when he has a decent quarterback, he is worthy of being a number one option. He has had 6 games the last 2 seasons with at least 7 targets. I think he's going to get 7 targets this week. In those games, averaging 12.5 points per game. And again, scoring double digits in every one of those games, despite not scoring a touchdown, which that's huge. To not score a touchdown and to get 10-plus points in 6 games, that's kind of in that Wan'Dale Robinson category where you're just putting up points. At 4,400 in cash, all we're looking for, right? 3 times their salary. You're talking about 12 points. To me, that's kind of right in that. And this Texans defense, overall good, but they're susceptible to big plays in the passing game. 6th most passing touchdowns in NFL. 2nd most passing plays of 40-plus yards. I think Mays is good. I really do. And if Polk, if I could see a little bit more, because he's played a lot. Like he played 89% of the routes 2 weeks ago, 100% of them last week. But I just haven't seen it. Douglas, we've seen when he gets a high volume, especially with just a decent, competent quarterback. Again, I mean, all I'm asking for is around 12 points. He's averaging 12.5 points per game with 7-plus targets his last 6. I think he's going to get 7 targets in this game. I think he's a good cash game play. Like I'm not expecting, like Polk's more likely to have 20 to 30 points. Do not get me wrong, but I think that Douglas is more likely to get you that 3 times number.
I think that's fair. I see. I was going to talk about Polk because what you said, where those first few weeks he's not on the field that much. He has 6 targets total the first 3 weeks. He has 13 the last 2, and then at least 6 in both. So it wasn't like he saw 12 in one and then he had like 2 in the other. It's like no, this is consistently he is out on the field. He is getting the targets. Obviously, was not productive. There's a reason that they made a QB change maybe earlier than they were originally planning to do so. And maybe this doesn't turn out to be the right week for these guys because that Houston defense is pretty good. They get a lot of pressure. Again, I don't trust that New England line.
I think that's good for Douglas. So that's kind of my point. Is like if May's going to get rid of it quickly, like Douglas is more of a PPR kind of Wan'Dale Robinson type guy. He's going to catch a good bit of passes, not for a ton of yards, but it's serviceable for cash, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable argument. And then I'm going to go to the guy who hurt me last week because I didn't talk about him, and then he decided to score a touchdown, and I feel a little bit offended. But it's Diami Brown at 4,000 against the Baltimore Ravens. This is another one where I'm looking at those splits, man zone. Ravens, 8th in man coverage this season. Diami, huge splits there. Fantasy points per route run goes way up. He's 6th among wide receivers currently in fantasy points per route run against man. His yards per route run goes from 0.35 against zone to 3.08 against man. Wow. So wildly more productive against man defense. And then the thing we always want to look at with Diami Brown is how is the opposition at defending deep passes? Though he has seen some targets in like the red zone area, which is a nice change. Ravens are 4th worst in DVOA on deep passes this season.
Wow.
So again, that's also obviously an argument for McLaurin again. Yeah. But yeah, if this is because of the heavy man usage, bad against deep passes, that's the opening I'm looking for a Diami Brown play.
Yeah, and Daniels has been starting to really stretch the ball more. Again, they're 3rd in yards per attempt. So it's kind of like the Brock Purdy thing where there's this notion that he's not throwing. He's airing it. Like he is throwing the ball down the field. Tight ends.
We also saw it in college. It's not like Purdy when none of us were watching his games in college. We're like, what can you do? It's like this was the best deep ball passer in college football last year. Again, in a college landscape that had Caleb Williams, that had Drake May. He was the best at throwing it deep. And yeah, we're starting to see that pay off, which is terrifying as a Giants fan, but exciting as someone who does fantasy football.
Completely agree. All right, tight end this week, to me, one of the easiest weeks in quite some time. There's 2 names, and really, I'm not budging. This is one of the rare weeks that I'm going one of these 2 ways. If you want to spend up, McBride at 5,700 is such a sneaky good play because he hasn't had a monster game. He's only, averaging just over 10 points per game. Green Bay is 23rd on DraftKings, which that's not, awful. But they've allowed 29 receptions to the opposing tight ends despite facing the Eagles, Colts, Titans, Vikings, and Rams. You can't name 6 of the tight ends on 2 or 3 of those teams, okay? So they have not played a stellar tight end yet, unless you want to, call Dallas Goedert one. And again, A.J. Brown went bananas. Saquon Barkley went bananas in that game. To my point, Colby Parkinson last week, who has really done nothing, been a big disappointment.
Right, he just runs
7 passes. Caught 7 passes versus defense. So I think McBride, if you want to spend up, that's the way to go. But Tucker Kraft, I made the mistake. I called Pat Freiermuth mini Gronk if I just waited, Joe. It's actually Tucker Kraft that looks a lot like mini Gronk out there. Since the Watson injury, they've unleashed this guy. I know obviously Dobbs was out last week too, but really it was like Watson got injured. They were struggling moving the ball, and they're like, all right, we're just going to go to this guy. Last 2 games, 14 targets, 10 receptions, 141 yards, 3 scores. Obviously, the 2 monster DK games, there were 43 points. Arizona ranks 17th versus tight ends, but they're another team. They haven't really faced that many good tight ends, and when they did last week in George Kittle, 8 receptions and a touchdown. Kraft, and again, he's done most of his damage the last 2 weeks. Among tight ends, 1st in red zone targets, 2nd in yak, 1st in touchdowns, 1st in yards per receptions, 2nd in target separation. I don't think this is a flash in the pan. I think this guy is going to be one of the top tight ends the rest of the year. And I think this is probably one of the last weeks you get him at a real value. So he's pretty much a smash play in all of my lineups. And I've actually already built a couple of lineups where I move McBride into the flex and play both of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue against him, especially because I put him in lineups the last 2 weeks, and he was my smash play last week. Yeah. And it's worked out amazing. So, yeah, I love him. I think, those top guys, if you want to do some double tight end stuff, I'm not against it. Bowers has been
the rate with Adams out is insane.
Right. He's done everything we've wanted him to do. And then he's facing a defense in Pittsburgh, which, as good as they've been in general, they've given up some points. Kyle Pitts actually had a pretty good week 1. Jake Ferguson last week, solid week. He had 13 points. So, yeah, I think there's opportunities for Bowers, like you already covered with McBride. McBride has kind of been the one guy who you were drafting in the top 5 tight ends who's actually come through for us. And, yeah, against Green Bay, who I think is going to light up the Cardinals defense, even more opportunities for McBride. You go down.
Can I just real quick, because you were talking about this, Bauer splits with Devontae Adams on and off. I knew I had this. Adams on 82 routes, 23% target per route run rate, 10% first down per route run rate, 1.95 yards per route run. Adams off 56 routes, 30% target per route run rate, 13% first down per route run rate, 2.73 yards per route run. And then to all your points about the Steelers defense.
And then, I'll talk about the guy you just kind of disparaged a little bit in Pat Freiermuth. Finished a top 13 tight end every week this season. That's
taken 6 points, Joe. So
I'm not saying that's like amazing, but like he has not. Not getting a little freezing sign next to him. When he scores touchdowns, you're in double digits, which is what's happened the last 2 weeks. And the thing is, against the Raiders, who are 14th against tight ends, that's really just they haven't given up a lot of targets to tight ends. They've only had 25 targets. 80% of those passes were completed for 8.4 yards per pass attempt. They're 31st in DVOA. Per PFF, the Steelers have the best matchup for tight ends this week. So it's not that they're good. They're just teams have found other ways to attack this defense. You get into an offense that really, outside of Pickens, has not been able to do much on the outside throwing the ball. Freiermuth has been consistently involved. Again, not amazing numbers, but he's getting at least 4 targets every week. I think there's some opportunity there. If you need to save some money from Tucker Kraft, obviously, listen, if you have a $500, put in Tucker Kraft. But if you need to save some money, I think that's there. Otherwise, if you're dropping lower, I think the Washington-Baltimore game is interesting. If you want to take a shot on Mark Andrews of under $4,000, which is, God, how did we get here? I think there's some interest there. And then Zach Ertz against a Ravens defense that's 28th against tight ends this year. I think there's something going on there too. Or also, Cade Otton, another guy where if you're saying Mike Evans is going to get wiped off the board by Lattimore, maybe he's an interesting one at 3,500. But in general, though, I am with you. I'm probably just going to be firing up Tucker Kraft in most, if not all, of my lineups again.
Yeah, I think
the
price is just too good to pass up.
The interest with tight end otherwise is, do I want to go cheaper on these other guys, or do I want to
play Bowers or McBride as like my flex?
I think that's the most likely one.
Because again, I treat those guys like wide receivers, and then it's the question: do I like the wide receivers in that range? Exactly. So, all right, defenses real quickly, and then we will get out of here. What an awful defensive week. The case I'm making, and it makes me sick to my stomach, is the Indy Colts at 3,100.
Okay.
And this is just a case of when they play a team with a good QB, they've been good. When they play a team with a bad QB, when they play a good QB, they've been bad. And when they play a bad QB, they've been good. And I mean, let's be honest, the Titans QB is real bad. I do.
Right. No team is giving up more points to the opposing defense than
and that's the way I look at it. I mean, I would like it a little bit more. Obviously, if this game was at home for Indy, but I mean, where else are you gonna go? Like, this is one of those weeks that the one case that I was gonna try to make was Cleveland. But again, they're at Philly. You got all those receivers coming back. I can't find it. I mean, again, I guess if you really want to go out there, it would be New England, and you hope that Nico Collins not being there. And again, I would only co-sign this if Joe Mixon doesn't play. If Joe Mixon's back, there's no way I can recommend, I think, New England at that price. It's one of those deals where they got teams that don't get pressure. Like the Browns is really the only exception, except for, I guess, if you want to say the Saints. And that might be actually talking myself into it. Where are you looking?
If I'm going cheap, which again, generally I am, for me, it's between two. It's the Patriots just all the way down. I'm saving the maximum amount of money. There's still some capable. The downside is I believe they are out both starting safeties. I think Jabril Peppers is out.
Yeah, well, Peppers is in trouble.
He might be out for a while. I think there's some danger there. Like I said, I love the Tank Dell play, But we're still talking about a team that's minus Nico Collins.
Yep.
From the limited amount of time we've seen them without Nico Collins this year. It has not been impressive.
Nope.
So, yeah, I think a capably coached team that still has some talented defensive players against a team missing a top 5 wide receiver. And like you said, if you're also missing Joe Mixon, extra interest. And then, like I said, with, that Bucs Saints, even as someone who's relatively optimistic about what the Saints offense will be without Carr, the turnover potential goes way up.
Yeah.
So 2,600 for the Bucs.
Oh shit! I didn't even realize they got 10 sacks the last 2 weeks too. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. That's a good call.
So this is a team that the Saints are kind of interesting too because that's an actually good defense, but
they're more expensive. Bucs offense,
right? And you're
up against Baker Mayfield
playing great. Yeah. So to me, in general, I'll try. If I have to, I'll play the Patriots 2,400. I'm okay with that. I'm definitely not picking.
I like that. I like just $200 more. To me, that's in that range where it's worth it. Like, because you're playing Rattler, they're getting pressure.
Yeah. If it's not a big difference somewhere else in my lineup, I will find the 200. I will put in Tampa Bay. Again, it hasn't worked out the way I always thought it would with Todd Bowles against rookies this season because, again, that's the one time Denver looked good and Bo Nix. But this is still a really smart defensive coordinator. Like you said, a team that's getting some sacks and a guy making his first start who was a day 3 pick. So,
and can we talk about, too, just real quickly, how it's so funny? You look at week 1 and you're going, oh, Daniels was disappointing, blah, blah, blah. And it's like maybe Tampa Bay was just really good because they still scored 20 points. And maybe that's why my Falcons, maybe it is better than I think. Maybe that 36 points is more impressive because you look, Philly, 16 points. Detroit, 16 points. Washington, 20 points. Like, in hindsight, maybe the Falcons were the outlier. I think that is 100% the play, Joe. I am glad you did that because that's going to save me $500 and I can readjust my cash lineups I got now. So you're a good man. We're going to let you get out of here. I know you're in Seattle having some good time. Anything you want to plug on our way out?
I don't think I have anything right now. Obviously, check out everything Fantasy Six Pack. Check out our podcast tomorrow. See what we're thinking for where we want to roll the dice a little bit harder. But otherwise, and be safe if you're anywhere in Florida. Shit, I mean, that's insane.
For you.
So
hoping that you're not. I'll have to send you the pictures of Stacey Perez's backyard. Like, she's okay. Didn't have any house damage, but literally her backyard is a pond right now, and there's a gator out there. And she's like, that's not normal.
Right. The best case scenario, you just have a gator in your backyard.
Yeah. It's like, oh, wow. Hello, Florida, man. I second Joe's, check out all the great stuff on Fantasy Six Pack. I will be back on the Sunday social show, Sunday morning, 12 o'clock with Chris Robin. And I promise you, because I will get it done tonight, sometime tomorrow, my DFS stacks and value plays article will be out. And I have been on fire with my stacks. I wish I'd be following more because, I'm trying to build stacks, and that's not something that I necessarily believe in big time. Like a QB receiver, yes, I am not somebody that is a game stack theory guy for cash. And like last week, guess what my game stack was, Joe? Freaking Lamar, Henry, Higgins, and Chase. How many lineups did I play that in? 0.
No.
So anyway, it is what it is. But I have been on fire. Seriously, we had the Fields Pickens play a couple of weeks ago. Had the Murray. I believe it was the huge Murray. No, it was it was the big Caleb Williams, DJ Morgan. Like, we've been on fire. I do a single stack, double stack, and a game stack. So be sure to check that out. Joe, I hope you have a great rest of your week. And we win some money. And again, thank you for that, Tampa Bay, man, because you talked me into. I feel really good about that. And I'm about to probably spend the next hour readjusting the cash lineups I've already built. So you have a great one. We'll see you guys soon.